Vanakkam. Hello friends. We saw in the previous episode about Neolithic age in Tamil country and man in the Kurunji regions. As Tamil country progressed into the Neolithic age, early man started making smoothened stone tools. Neolithic cells were discovered by the thousands in the caves and forests scattered over various regions of South India, from the Chevroy Hills in Salem district to Kurnool and Bellary, systematically explored and documented by Robert Bruce Foote. The Belam Caves in Kurnool, Andhra, that he first discovered in 1884, a 3.5 kilometer stretch of cave system formed over tens of thousands of years by the constant flow of the underground river that is now extinct, known as the Chitravadi, the Padala Ganga. Today, it is a centrally protected national monument. Another very important discovery by Robert Bruce Foote was the Theri Kadu, the Theri sites along the coast of the Thoothukudi regions, old red sand dunes that contained hundreds of thousands of cells made of semi-precious rocks such as quartz and cherts. The tools excavated in these regions included bifacial points, arrowheads, geometric and non-geometric blades, and these were dated to between 10,000 and 4,000 BCE. As a dedicated geologist, Robert Bruce Foote spent 40 years with the Geological Survey of India, and we are indebted to him as he single handedly explored and unearthed the archaeological antiquity of a hitherto and still neglected South India, and a valuable collection of his expeditions over these 40 years into the south and west of India, documenting his geological and archaeological finds, today are lodged in the Madras Museum at Chennai. Upon his passing away in the year 1912, he was cremated in Calcutta and his ashes were interned at the Holy Trinity Church in Yerkad, where lived his father-in-law, Reverend Peter Percival, an erudite Tamil scholar himself who translated Tamil proverbs and Avayar's literature into English and was a major influence on Robert Foote. The both of them shared a common interest in Tamil culture, history, and linguistics. Foote also made a unique discovery of two bone tools deep in the gravel beds of the Narmada River. Now, how did these bone tools survive without getting decomposed? It's because they were embedded beneath 250 feet of material, about 50 feet of alluvial soil, and about 200 feet of wind-blown grayish yellow loess, Bandalman in Tamil, that had been blown in by the winds of the Gulf of Cambay and the Rann of Kutch. And this 250 feet depth attesting to the antiquity of settlements in these regions. As the Neolithic hunter-gatherer population increased in the Kurunji regions, man started putting pressure on the fragile ecosystem around him and started looking for new areas to extend, especially in search of food, and came to the periphery of the jungles, the thin shrub forests known as Kurungadu in Tamil, where he must have seen herds of cattle roaming about freely. Remember, while exploring the Indus Valley Connect, we saw how in the outpost of the Mehergar regions, as early as 7000 BCE, man had domesticated cattle and goats. In these regions, the Mullai regions, though we do not have archaeological attestations, cattle rearing should have happened by around the same time independently. And there is a very interesting poem in Sangam literature that sort of explains a situation in which this could have happened. In Kurundogai 322 by Ayyur Mudavan, Amarkan Aman Amsevi Kulavi, Kanavar Eduppa Veriyi, Imai Tirndu Kanam Nanniya Sidugudi Pattana, Idayar Vomba Mariyi goes the song. It describes how the calf of a wild cow got separated from the herd and was caught by the hunters who took it to their shelter. This calf was brought up by the young children there almost as if it were a pet, and the hunters found the animal was so easily domesticated. So, from here, man should have understood that these cattle could be reared at home. And P.T. Srinivasa Iyengar in his Stone Age India gives his own interesting version of the earliest animal that man could have domesticated, the wild dog. The canine followed the hunter gatherer at a safe distance, waiting patiently to gorge on the remains of a hunt. And seeing this, man domesticated the dog, as it not only helped him in his chase but also helped him sniff out wild animals, not only here but in other parts of the world as well. And that's how the dog became man's best friend. Once domesticated, the herds started multiplying in large numbers, especially as the herds no longer had to fear the tiger and the wolves in those thin jungles. And once they started increasing in number, man had to look for new pastoral lands. We saw how in the steppe regions the nomad people had to shift towards newer and newer grasslands. Well, what happened in the Tamil country where there was vegetation all around? Early man observed how forest fires were started by dry bamboo that was dense in these regions, and soon he learned to make forest fires to burn down trees and pave the way to create pastoral settlements. And the earliest evidence of this burning down in these regions again is dated to 3000 BCE, based on a very interesting discovery again made by Robert Bruce Foote, typical to South India. As early as in 1872, Foote discovered a Neolithic ash mound in Andhra in a place called Budikal. Soon, hundreds of sites were discovered with these cinder mounds that were man made landscape features in places such as Budithippa, Budikanama, and the largest at Budikunta in Bellary was 46 feet in height and 420 feet in circumference. A local myth had it that this large mound was the burnt remains of a Rakshasa. Foote compared these ash mounds to the zaribas in Africa that were formed by burning cow dung, and indeed he established that these ash mounds were made from burning wood and cattle dung. Here the word budi meaning ash in English, budi meaning sambal in Tamil, vibudi, the holy ash that is got from actually burning cow dung. These places were named after the ash mounds. So here we had evidence that starting 3000 BCE, to create pastoral lands for his herds, man started burning down forests. And as recently as in February 2020, for the first time, the students of the Department of Ancient History and Archaeology of Chennai excavated a Neolithic ash mound here in Valasai in Gudiyatham, Vellore district, complete with early Iron Age tools and pottery shards. So once out of his cave into these thin jungles, early man must have faced the need to create his own shelter, and he built these small huts using wattle, in Tamil Veli Tatti, weaving together the thin branches of trees and topping it up with bamboo and wooden rafters, the kind of huts that we see even today scattered across Tamil Nadu in remote village areas. Again, pottery should also have been invented around the same time to store water and perhaps milk and buttermilk. We saw while exploring Mehergarh how in 7000 BC itself pottery shards were excavated, and though the pottery wheel itself was a later invention, pots were constructed using the slab construction technique. And it is interesting how P.T. Srinivasa Iyengar makes a comparison of these huts made of bamboo rafters, on top of which a broken pot is kept upside down to prevent these rafters from flying off. This could have been the prototype after which the temples with the kalasam on top was designed by Tamil man. Well, with increase in human population, man started gradually shifting from food gatherer to food producer, and the shift to agro-pastoralism in these regions of South India are marked by unique Neolithic stone tools that were used for cultivation. Two types of stone tools excavated in these regions by Foote and dated by him to around 5000 years ago was the stone axe and the stone adzes. The stone axe was used for cutting down trees and plants, while the stone adzes probably should have been affixed to a wooden handle and used for ploughing the field. The edges of these stone tools were quite often polished and sharpened against rock surfaces. Grooves for sharpening polished tools were found on the bedrock of the Javada Hills in the middle of a rivulet near Kiranur village, Vellore district. When tools got blunted, Neolithic man used these grooves on the rock beds to sharpen his tools. Again, not just these stone tools, but pounders, slabs for grinding, mortars and pestles, pivot stone and stone vessels, even pendants, buttons, and stone marbles that kids used to play with were all excavated by Bruce Foote. Thus, Neolithic Stone Age seemed to have continued well into the pastoral and agro-pastoral stages of the life of the people in South India as herds expanded, producing more dairy products than what the people could consume. Somewhere in these regions, the Mullai people started engaging in barter trade with the Kurunji people in the hills. And how do we know this? Neolithic quads and sherd stools excavated in the regions around Madurai, where these kind of rocks are not found in situ, meant that they were brought from the Kurunji hills, while archaeologist Selvakumar, who explored the Varsanadu Andipatti cave shelters, found grinding stones and domesticated edible grains inside the rock shelters, proving that some sort of barter trade was going on way back then. Among the stone tools, a very interesting find is the slick stone that was used to put gloss upon the surface of cotton cloth while it was still in the loom. Remember again in Mehergarh, where archaeologists found a string of beads that was strung using a cotton thread that was dated to 7000 BCE. Though we do not have direct archaeological evidence to prove that cotton cultivation was happening in the south in those times, the black soil that was available in plenty and such early found stone tools that aided the cotton production process helps us believe that cotton cultivation should have started here contemporaneous with Mehergarh, and also in these regions with the absence of direct archaeological evidence. We have seen earlier how we depend on proto-history recorded in the other contemporaneous ancient civilizations like Egyptian and Sumerian to look for traces of our early culture. And one such finding that we saw in an earlier episode, the ostentatious Mycop culture that thrived in the Pontic Caspian, where dated to 3700 BCE, archaeologists excavated from a pit burial fragments of linen and cotton cloth, and they concluded that the cotton cloth should have come from South India, thereby concluding that cotton cultivation should have started by at least 5000 BCE for people here to have value added to the cotton, made it into cloth, and exported it to the Mycop regions. While the reasons for the lack of archaeological evidence, one could be that being very ancient country, multiple settlements must have happened in any given place, burying the archaeological evidence way below. The other reason being, with the expanse of timber that was available at hand, Tamil man used wood for building his shelters and granaries, making tools and meshes. The maraka that even today we have at home, wood was used for making jewelry and toys and weapons and whatnot, all of which was lost to the tropical heat, the rest being eaten up by the termites. As early as in 1939, the noted historian K.N. Dikshit observed, it would not be too much to hope that a thorough investigation of the areas of Tinanelli district and the neighboring regions, such as the ancient seaport of Korkai, will one day lead to the discovery of some site which would be contemporaneous with that of the Indus Valley civilization. While no such miracle has happened yet, the fact remains that the archaeological excavations in these areas, not enough was done from where the likes of Robert Bruce Foote left. The noted British historian and Indologist Vincent A. Smith, who published the early history of India in 1914, exclaimed, and I quote, "Hitherto, most historians of ancient India have written as if the South did not exist." Well, one unique feature in the Tamil country is how, even after the shift happened from forestry to pastoralism to agro pastoralism, and from there to agriculture proper and fishery, tracing the evolution of man through the various landscapes of the Tamil country. All of these areas existed parallelly at the same time, and many of the cultural markers from that time continue till this day, helping us understand or recreate many aspects of our hidden past. For example, the Todas, a people speaking a Dravidian tongue, living in seclusion in the Nilgiri hills, an agro-pastoral people whose lifestyle hasn't changed much over the years. Look at this painting done by Richard Barron from 1837 and compare it to a photograph taken in 2006. Their shelter and habitat hasn't changed much, though the backdrop has changed, where you see a series of tea cultivations happening. The lifestyle of the Todas themselves, who venerate and worship the buffalo, has not changed much at all. Similarly, in a research paper published in April 2020 titled The Pastoral Communities of Tamil Nadu in Peril in an international magazine named Monga Bay, featuring the lives of the pastoral people known as the Konar living in the interior villages of Tirunelveli and Kanyakumari district, who have been herders for centuries together and who have had access to the traditional grasslands that begin at the foothills of the Western Ghats. Well, while the article is about the socio-economic changes that have been happening in the past few decades, ruining the livelihoods of the people, what is interesting to us is the cultural markers prevalent among the people that help retrace history. The name Konar, used for milkman, that we traditionally know in these regions, the term ko goes way back to the Mullai or pastoral regions, and ko meaning a head or a ruler. Remember how, while exploring the pastoral herders, the steppe people of Europe, we saw how they organized themselves into large communities and had their leaders who eventually became rulers. Here too, the Mullai people were forced to cohabitat in large communities to take care of their ever multiplying herds. Soon, a ruler emerged, the Ko, later on taking the Undigri, he became Kon, the term used to describe a king later on, and Kol, the staff that he had in his hands with which he shoed his cattle, became Sengol, scepter in the hands of the king. The humble abode made of timber probably, where this ruler lived, was Ko plus Il, that became Koil, first used to denote the abode of the ruler, the king, in these regions. And very interestingly, as several neighboring communities with their own rulers emerged, soon wealth creation leading to typical problems, and just as in the steppe region, here too the herders engaged in the theft of cattle from neighboring communities, and this became such an ingrained practice that it was codified as a way of life in the earliest extant Tamil grammar work Tolgapiyam in Poruladiharam, Aanirai Kavardal, about which we will be seeing later. And these rulers eventually became the chieftains, the Kurunila Mannargal. We will explore more of the Tamil people's lives in these different landscapes in the following episode. Vanakkam.